This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the management. This podcast may contain adult theme, so parental discretion is advised. So welcome, Kathryne Imabayashi. I hope I pronounced the name correct. I was
Close enough.
practicing. I was practicing. He's a seasoned educator, global leader, and founder of Sonhood Coaching. With over 30 years of experience across classrooms and continents, she has seen firsthand what helps boys thrive, but what holds them back. So whether you're navigating toddler tantrums or teenage transitions, you're in the right place. So if you
Well,
want to
thank
give
you.
a
That's a lovely
yeah,
introduction.
thank you so much. Yeah, so if you want to give a quick introduction and pronounce your name correctly, it's, probably didn't do it.
Well,
Just it.
okay. My full name is Kathy Imabayashi. I'm Canadian by birth, and I live in Japan, and that's where my roots are now. As you mentioned, I was in education for 40 years. I retired 5 years ago. And in trying to decide how I wanted to kind of go into this third chapter, I considered a lot of things and then decided just to follow my heart and do what resonated with me my whole life. So not to take the easy way out. And so I started a business after I retired it's 5 years ago now.
Mhm.
And I wanted to continue to focus on my passion, which is helping people understand the inner emotional world of boys, supporting parents, caregivers, educators to try to create more awareness and understanding on how to help our little boys and men with compassion and understanding. So in the last 5 years, uh, definitely with a great deal of help from my son, I created a business, set up a website, created, a dozen different kinds of online courses for parents. I have a membership for parents. I wrote a book for my son, and then I wrote a parenting book that I published about a year and a half ago now. I decided after publishing the book, I first of all went on a bunch of podcasts because I read that's what you're supposed to do, and talked about boys and talked about my book. And then I didn't know what I was going to do next. And my son suggested, he just said kind of, well, Mom, I think your next step is to start your own podcast. And so I started that a little more than a year ago now. And this summer, I made a bit of a turn. I've been interviewing parents who are raising boys and that kind of a program. And from this summer, I decided the voices I really want to hear are men's. And so it's been on interviewing young men, young fathers, or experts that are focused on male mental health and masculinity. And so that's kind of where I am right now.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful. Sounds like a beautiful journey that you're on.
And it keeps going.
Yeah, yeah. So let's look at the landscape. In your experience, what's the most commonly misunderstood aspect of raising boys today?
Well, I think I'm going to start because a lot of the questions that we have about, how boys are come back to one main point, and it's what Dr. William Pollack several decades ago referred to as the boy code. And a little bit more recent, it's been called the man box. But that's the set of societal expectations that are placed on younger boys, on boys, sorry, boys in
Boys.
general. And that code is boys will be boys should be boys, and boys are toxic. So it's about the expectation of a boy to be stoic, like not to show any vulnerable feelings, to be the man, toughen up, all the stereotypical biases that are connected with what it means to be a man. So what happens with the boy code is that if that's the society that we're living in, then we often unconsciously put those expectations on our sons. And so it's like we excuse behavior because we say, oh, it's a boy thing. It's that's just the way they are. And so they get away with things that they need to have the guidance around. And we don't pay enough attention to things like really developing their emotional intelligence. Like I would say one of the most misunderstood things is that there's a perception that boys just aren't as emotional, that they don't feel as much as the female. And that's really a myth. There's no truth to that. Uh, Personally, I have found in some ways, I almost think males are more empathetic and their feelings are they're there, like they have very deep feelings. It's that they're not accepted to show those feelings, show that vulnerability. So then their behavior comes out in the behaviors that are acceptable because of the boy code. And that's usually anger and aggression and things like that.
Yeah, that's so true because normally when something happens to a boy and he starts to cry, the first thing people say, "Oh, you need to stop crying, stop the crying. You
Yeah.
need to you're a boy." So that
Yeah.
as if being a boy doesn't takes away the pain that you physically feeling. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's so true that you say that.
So
And
what happens after that, exactly what you said, is that, especially when they're growing up and they are, establishing their own identity. Every time that that little boy expresses some behavior that's vulnerable or doesn't follow the boy code, like crying or showing a weakness or being a mama's boy, something like that, he gets the message that that's not okay. Like he's got to toughen up. He's got to
right,
separate from mom. He's got to be a big boy. And every time that the feeling that he has expressed is shunned or he's meant to feel embarrassed about it, he puts up a mask and he puts that mask up and then uh, changes his behavior so that it's the acceptable behavior because he does not want to lose connection with the most important people in his life, which is usually starts off as his mom and dad. So
right.
in order to keep that connection deep, he puts up the mask, and the next time he doesn't cry, he holds that in, puts that mask up, and is what he's expected to be. But the problem is that over time, every single time that that little boy puts up one mask and another mask and another mask and another mask, at some point further down the road, it's possible that that young man is not going to be able to find that pure-hearted, sweet little boy inside because there are just too many masks. He's had to suppress too much of himself and he can't tap into his authentic self. And that's I mean, that's heartbreaking.
So part of the problem is that the emotional support isn't really there from the parents because normally you can't give what you don't have because if you weren't socialized or come from a family that show allow you to be who you are emotionally, you know you you're gonna probably carry that same sort of mindset into your parenting skills. So
Mhm.
how do we break this cycle?
Well, that's probably the most difficult thing about what I do, because it's kind of, if you don't know there's a problem, then you're not going to do anything about it. So you're actually perpetuating the problem. So the first thing is trying to just make people aware that there is a problem. And that's the first thing. It's kind of like that, when they say, tell someone not to think of a purple elephant and that's all they can think of. It's the same thing.
This
If you can
is
tell,
true. Yeah.
yeah, if you can have people become aware that there is unconscious gender bias around how we're raising our little boys and treating our men, then they'll see it everywhere. So first there has to be the awareness. And then once they have the awareness, there has to be enough information out there for parents to learn a little bit more, to learn about what some of the differences are in how you raise a boy to be, emotionally healthy, and how you communicate, what some of the differences are between the genders, what discipline works with boys that is different than it is with girls. You have to have that new information so that you can take it all in and then see what works best for you and your son.
So, so when your clients come to you and want seeking guidance, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that? Because the fact that they're boys, yes, but also they're individuals.
Yeah.
You might have a boy that is a top, really boy, and then you might have a boy who's not as, aggressive as the other boys. So how do you navigate?
So usually by the time parents are reaching out to me, they're on their last, their last
Nerve.
nerve, that's where the last nerve. And so a lot of it is creating some compassion for their son, because always, no matter what kind of a boy, what his character is, whatever that behavior that is, touching your last nerve, whatever that is, the goal is not just to eliminate that problem, but every behavior, there is something deeper inside that
Yes.
you have to get to the root of it. So if your little boy is having like a full-blown meltdown every single day he comes home from kindergarten, and nothing you do works, and no discipline, no distraction, nothing works. If you try to just take care of that tantrum, you're not going to get very far. You might temporarily, but it's not addressing the issue. But if you can get, so that's what I do with them, is trying to get to what is the root of the problem? What's some of the possibilities? What's going on in school? And the misbehavior can really be looked at as a signal, kind of a cry for help, saying, there's something wrong in my world. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to explain it. So it's going to come out in what's acceptable. And that's usually, aggression and misbehavior.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting because sometimes you might have a child who doesn't misbehave at home, but when he goes to school, he creates a whole lot of problem. So when the teachers is complaining about the child, you're like, what is she talking about? That isn't my child. But sometimes they behave at home because they know they have repercussions. Well, whether it's corporal punishment or whatever, but there's repercussion. But probably in the school environment or where they are, that isn't that stringent, and they tend to act out more there. Have you come across cases like that?
Well, in that particular kind of a situation, my guess would be that in the home, there are clear, consistent rules with accountability, with understanding, with respect. And that's usually where a little boy feels secure and safe and understands, and and accommodates, or however you want to say that. But that's his feel-good situation where he knows exactly what the rules are, what the consequences are if you break the rules, and that it's always fair, firm, and consistent. When he gets into school, like school is a whole different ball game that
Yes, yes.
I don't think parents of boys really understand what a struggle it is for them. So you get a little boy in the younger years, like, and they're starting school younger and younger and younger.
Right,
And the academics have been pushed down further and further and further. So the expectation for behavior, for performance in those younger years is not developmentally appropriate for a little boy. So the little boy cannot sit, in the circle for 20 minutes like the little girls can. He's not so good at sitting and trying to read and write and do that. He wants to be moving around. He wants to be using his body. He wants to be manipulating things. And none of that
right.
is accommodated in the classroom. So he begins to feel more and more like a failure. And little by little, year after year after year, that beautiful spark that he starts with when he's so excited to start school gets, blown out because
Right.
he cannot perform. And it's not him, but he thinks it's him. It's the environment, it's the institution and the system that he's part of.
But how can parents really address this? Because it's any way you take it, well, Montessori probably says it's different, but most of the schools are basically following the same, you
Yeah.
know, behavior pattern
Yes.
as to how they treat
Yeah.
boys.
So again, the first thing is the awareness. So if you recognize that your little guy is kind of going and fighting battle every single day, and he's trying so hard to do the right thing, to get his teacher to love him, to not get in trouble at school, because then he's going to get in trouble at home. Like he's just working so hard. If we recognize that, if we can recognize that he's kind of set up for failure rather than set up for success.
Right,
If we can do things within the school system, if we can, like kind of share information, like you read a really great article about young boys in public schools, and you share it with his teacher, or once you've got
right.
yourself with some understanding, you try to share that. But I will tell you from being on both sides of the road as a parent and as an educator, the world of education, that institution moves very slowly. And the reality is you may not have any support or understanding in the school system. So if that's not part of what you can do, you need to look really carefully at what you can do. And it's big. The power of parents and the family is the greatest power. Like honestly, I've seen it over and over and over again. So those little boys that are really struggling, when they come home to a place where they can relax, where they can be themselves, where they can express themselves fully, where they have people in there that understand how hard they work every day, that can explain to him in a developmentally appropriate way for his age that it's not about him. It's a tough spot he's in,
Right.
but you're going to help him get through it. And how you help him get through it is being really in tune with what's happening with his self-esteem. And the minute that he starts to either really act out or really shut down, then those are the red flags that say, okay, as a parent, I've got to like up the game as far as creating opportunities and experiences for my little boy to feel successful and powerful, loved, cared, all of those things. And it makes a difference. It makes a big, big difference.
So how do you help parents to shift from being reactive to more of a leadership role in regard to
Well,
the boys?
part of it is just when you look at a boy having a tantrum or being defiant or the things that just get
Yes,
us riled up, we're thinking only of that behavior. But if we can stop ourselves just for a minute and get really curious and try to figure out what's the why, like
right.
why, what's going on? What is so painful in my little boy's world that this is how it's coming out? And the minute you can make that switch to real compassion, it changes because you don't react the same way. It's kind of like maybe the behavior is not acceptable, but how you support him, how you guide him is based on compassion, understanding there is something wrong in his world. He's not just being a brat. He's not just being, a boy.
Mhm.
There's something wrong.
So what, how does, based on your experience, how does the whole peer pressure and all of that fit into shaping his personality and how the boy reacts to his environment?
Well, it's really interesting because recently I had an interview with a young man. He was 19 years old and very supportive family, this and that. He had a few challenges, dyslexia and things like that. But he really talked well about environment and peers. And he told me the story of like when he was 16 and he got a part-time job at McDonald's and he got in with the wrong crowd, which ended up in him going down a road that was taking him in the wrong direction. And it was only because that really blew up and to a situation that, he reached out to his mom for support because he thought he was dying. Um, from that, he moved into another job in a cafe where the people that were there were a little bit older, not much, but a little bit older, but they had a different viewpoint. Like they talked about, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to be, whatever, whatever. But they talked differently. It wasn't just about, well, I'm 16, I'm going to party hardy and, give her everything and who cares about tomorrow. It was a different type of peer that he was around, and that turned his whole life around. So peers make a big difference. And I think especially during the teens, they're very, very influential.
Yeah, mentorship. I think probably the older folks could, tell them about their life story and the mistakes that they made and their regrets, and let him start to think deeper than
Yeah,
the surface level things that his 16-year-old, friends were doing. I think
exactly.
mentorship is very important, especially we have a lot of single mothers out there, and I think it's very difficult to raise a boy as a woman. Not that you can't, but there's just some things that a man has to train a boy. That's just my thoughts on it and my experience. I mean, yes, you can probably show him to change the tire, but you might not know to change it that well, as opposed if you have a man to show him, because that's, like in my environment when I was growing up, I had a lot of uncles and other father figures. I had my personal father, but we had so many other male influence around. So we know to change the tire because, they're gonna say to you, you can't be on the road. Suppose anything happened to you, we're not there. You need to to change the tire if you get a
Yeah, well,
puncture. You know what I mean?
I agree that there are I think Like I do agree. There are a lot of homes where where moms are doing an incredible job raising boys. Like I know that firsthand and personal. And over again, it's not that, it's not that there has to be a male figure in the household. Like it
Not
doesn't have to be
necessarily
that
in the
way.
household.
No. So you have something like your uncles or it's, your brother or whoever, but
Yeah,
as long as there is that balance, like we all, little girls, little boys, both need some things that maybe mostly come from the female adult, and there are other things that mostly come more naturally from the male side. So
right.
it's getting the best from both sides.
Yes, yes. Because even in regard to relationship, you're gonna speak to, if I'm speaking to my son, I'm gonna speak to him based on how the woman feel, not necessarily how he as a man supposed to feel about what is exactly going on in the relationship. I'm just gonna give him my female perspective, but if
Yeah.
he has a male, they can talk about, you know, their experiences from a male perspective. So
Yeah.
I think that we really need more men to come out and help in mentoring roles, you know.
Yeah, I agree. There needs to be more mentorship for like even some of the bigger institutions like Big Brothers and things
Big
like that.
brothers, yes. Yes, we used to
Yeah,
have
that
that.
that kind. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have that sort of thing where, a lot of businessmen, and plus they help them to sort of focus on careers that they can grow on, and they give them jobs inside the different companies uh,
Hmm.
that they get they get to experience, what it is you do in a company and the
Yeah.
responsibilities that go. Everybody, persons are depending on you to do your role, that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's
Hmm.
interesting. So when it comes to working with Sonhood Coaching, I know you said that you have worked in global leadership. So I want to look at the bigger picture. What is the vision that your Sonhood Coaching carries? What is the legacy and what is the vision that it carries?
Well, the vision and mission of it is definitely to try to create an awareness
Mhm.
of the inner emotional world of our boys, try to create more available knowledge to help raise the level of compassion and empathy, um, and just to be a very, very strong advocate for our boys.
So, so what really inspired you then? Because you told us about the objective and but I know you said you mentioned your son, but I don't know, was it just something that happened, or because of your wealth of experience, you figured that this was an area that you really wanted to target?
No, I was just like every other person and totally unaware of my own unconscious gender biases. And like most people, I would have sworn that I didn't have it, that I was very open-minded. I was very aware of stereotyping, and I didn't do that. I would have sworn that. So what happened? There is a story that goes with it. And had that not happened, I'm sure I would not be doing this. When my son was about 3 or 4, I took him on a little fishing, morning when his dad was working. So just the two of us, we went, it was in Japan. and there was a little creek or a little river, and it was down, not so far off the main road, but it was down a, tree-lined path. And we went down there, and, he had his little plastic fishing rod, and, it was just a beautiful Saturday, and, life was good. And out of the corner of my eyes, I saw what in my mind I registered a gang of young boys coming down that path. And instinctively, I went closer to my son, and all I could, like, I was filled with fear, like immediately, like my heart was pounding. It was fear. And it was like, what am I going to do? There's a gang coming down, and how am I going to protect my little boy and myself? And like, I was really afraid. The boys came down, and sure enough, they were, young boys, 12, 13 maybe. And like, I know I was teaching that age group at the time, the year before that. I was teaching the 10-year-olds, 10 turning 11. And I knew that next summer is for many little boys when they have this huge growth spurt into adolescence, and they're all arms and legs. They're, tall and,
Right. Thick
gangly,
and deep
and
voice.
yes, yes, and everything changes. But I also knew from working with that group that, inside they are still little boys. Like, they are
Right.
not young men, they are little boys. So
Mhm.
these guys came down, and it was just really obvious very fast. There was nothing to be afraid of. Um, we had such a good time with them. My little guy loved being with the big kids, and they were just sweet boys, and we had a wonderful time. So that could have been it. But I am very sensitive and very analytical, and I like things to make sense. It doesn't have to be things that I agree with, but I just like to make sense of things. And when they don't, it eats away at me. So after I put my son to bed, I was sitting there, and I really started to think, why did I react that way? Like, I don't have any trauma. I've never been hit. I've never seen a lot of violence from men. I don't watch the news. Like, I could not pinpoint why, as soon as I saw them coming down, I was filled with fear. And it was just driving me crazy because I could not get a reason. And I was just about to let it go, and then, come back after I slept on it, and try to figure it out the next day. And I had this image in my head, and it was, okay, my little boy is 3. So in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, is there going to be another mom or another woman who is filled with fear just by seeing my son because he's a male, not because of what he's doing or saying or wearing, just because he's a male? And I thought, it broke my heart to think someone would be afraid of my little boy. And that's what started. It's like, I don't know why this is happening, but there's something wrong with this picture in our society, and I'm going to find out, and then I'm going to tell everybody about it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, 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 what legacy? What based on that beautiful, you know, how it started moment? What's the legacy that you would like to leave? The legacy in regard to um sonhood coaching. What's your legacy of all the work that you're
Um,
putting in it?
well, I think the first thing that's really important to me is that my son, and if he's lucky enough to have children as well, that he knows that his mom is standing up for his emotional worlds, and that she has done the best she could to spread the word so that more men could show their authentic feelings. Like, that's the most important thing to me first. And the second part is that even if it's a small number, if there is any little boy whose life changes for the better, or any family whose life changes for the better because of what I have done, then it's more than worth it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, any nuggets you want to leave with our listeners before we wrap up?
The only thing that, like, every one of the main things that parents who come to me talk about is discipline. And often, like, there's enough research out there to, statistics and everything to, you can find it out there. But
Mhm.
boys are often disciplined much stricter and stronger
Yeah,
than girls are, whether it's at home or at school, both places.
yes, that's
And
true.
so that's one of the areas that I think if we just change our perspective, it's kind of like how did we get to the point that we equate discipline with punishment? Like, uh, like how did we get here? And my belief and what I have seen work over and over and over again, when we can see that that misbehavior that we are going to, punish for, when we use discipline as a guidance and we try to understand what the emotion is behind that misbehavior and empathize, help that child understand what they've done, help them go through a process where they can kind of brainstorm and come up with a plan for the next time a similar situation has so that they can make better choices. And also for them to come up with a way to hold themselves accountable so that what you're teaching the child is self-regulation rather than the parent being the disciplinarian. You're the guider. You're the one who helps them develop the tools and the strategies so that they can handle this misbehavior more independently.
I done a podcast with this lady who teaches gentle parenting. So something you were saying something similar to what you were saying a few minutes there about letting the child see, come to the same conclusion. This is what you did. How do you feel about it? Sort of thing. Would you like somebody to do that to you? How would and for them to come to the same conclusion that what they did wasn't right and how they would, if a similar situation happens again, what they would do. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
think there are some similarities with
similarities, yeah.
gentle parenting, but I also think, especially for boys, you have to remember, as far as that guidance go, fair, firm, and consistent.
Right,
Like
right.
I was a very strict mom.
Yeah,
There was nothing, I was very strict, but I was very fair
yes,
and I was consistent
yes,
and
yes.
it works.
Yeah. Yeah, especially consistency, I know definitely. You need your yeah must be yeah and your nay must be nay. You have
Yes,
to be
exactly.
consistent. You can't be wishy-washy because they
Yeah.
will figure it out. That's
Well,
for
they
sure.
have to test you. They have to test because if you let it go one time, they've got to test you at least 10 times because there's always that little chance.
Yes, the little child. All right, we could
Yeah.
go on and on forever. So how can my listeners get in touch with you?
Um, Everything is connected through the website.
Mhm.
So sonhoodcoaching.com, and that's
Okay.
SON. I'm on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. But the everything, if you go to the website, that's where everything is in one place. There's a few, like I've got some blogs and articles on there, and there's,
Okay.
I think, two or three freebies, like to help share the information. So you just go
Okay.
on and grab them.
Okay, I put your information in the notes in Spotify. I'll do
Thank you.
that. Yeah. So that's what it. So, so here we are. So until next time, keep leading with love, listening with intention, and believing in the incredible boys we're raising. You've got this, and we are cheering for you every step of the way.